Every leader expects to carry responsibility. Few expect to carry emotional residue or for it to begin feeling like betrayal. Not from one defining moment, but from hundreds of smaller ones. The client who chose someone else, the trusted relationship that unraveled, the opportunity that disappeared without explanation, the moments that seem too small to grieve, but somehow still change how we trust, lead, and show up every day. Today, we're exploring the weight we don't always recognize we're carrying and how those experiences shape the leaders we eventually become. Welcome to Deals with Heels. I'm Debra, your host, and this is where we go beyond the surface of business, leadership, and sales and into the real decisions that shape how we grow. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Debi Silber. Dr. Debi is the founder of the Post-Betrayal Transformation Institute and one of the world's leading researchers on betrayal recovery. Through her groundbreaking work, she has helped more than 100,000 people better understand how betrayal affects our health, relationships, leadership, and ability to move forward. Her research has transformed the way we think about betrayal, not simply as a painful experience, but as a distinct form of trauma that leaves lasting effects unless it's understood and healed. Dr. Debi, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. Very excited to talk about it. And I want to start, we often think about betrayal as one big major event, and I think all of us have had those events in our life. But can smaller experiences of disappointment, rejection, and broken trust really resonate in a similar way over time?
That's the death by 1,000 cuts type. And it's I define betrayal as the breaking of a spoken or unspoken rule. So it really can mean anything, and every relationship has them. The way it works, though, is the more you trust and the more you depend on the person, the deeper the betrayal. So, for example, a child who's totally dependent on their parent and the parent does something awful, that's going to have a different level of cleanup than, let's say, your coworker taking credit for your idea. Still betrayals, different magnitude of what needs to be healed.
And if you have, say, the coworker thing, and you don't understand it and really heal from it, and you have that, and then you have another small one over here that happens, can they build this cumulative effect?
Well, a classic sign of an unhealed betrayal is a repeat betrayal. So the faces change, but it's the same thing. So we go from boss to boss to boss, coworker to coworker, friend to friend, partner to partner. And we say, is it me? Yes, it is. Not in that it's your fault, in that it's your opportunity. There's a profound lesson waiting to be learned. Maybe the lesson is just understand already that you are lovable, worthy, and deserving. Get already that you need better boundaries in place. Whatever that particular lesson is for you, until and unless you get that, you're going to have opportunities in the form of people to teach you.
This is true. I often said from my own personal experience that I wish I would have been able to make a decision to change my life when I knew I could feel something's not right. It's not right. I knew something was wrong, but now I know I was in functional freeze and I couldn't make a decision, but I was thrust there, right? Through tragedy, through betrayal, through my own betrayal of myself even, because eventually it all comes to head. And now we've got this whole big chunk and there's a lot of different places that it's healing from. So if you've built it up, let's say you have the one final straw, the boss or the coworker or the friend that stabs you in the back, so to speak. And we know that it's not that one thing because our reaction is so much bigger. How do we start to heal that when it's the accumulation?
Yeah. Well, even just to get back to what you said, when you felt something was off, this is what we do. So often we either intentionally or unintentionally turn down our intuition. Now, unintentionally, we have so much to do. And it's almost like the only way we can get it done is to do more thinking and doing than feeling and being. Feeling and being takes a bit more time. So we turn that down so we could be almost more machine-like and check things off our list. So we're unintentionally turning down our intuition. But then, to your point, we can intentionally turn it down, and it looks like this. There must be a logical explanation. I'm sure it's not what it seems. It's got to be. There's got to be a reason for this. Our intuition is telling us something. We're justifying, making, rationalizing. And what we're doing is we're making a decision that at this point in time, we may not have the mental, the emotional, maybe the financial bandwidth to take that on. So since that's our choice, we're like, you know what? I'm going to look the other way. I'm going to turn the other cheek. I'm going to act like I didn't see what I just saw, felt what I just felt in the hopes that it's going to go away. Now, I've been in business 35 years, and there's one saying, and it applies to everything. And it's hard now, easy later. Easy now, hard later. Take your pick. It's one of those two. That intentionally shutting down your intuition is easy now. It's not comfortable. It's not fun, but easy now. You don't have to have that difficult conversation, confrontation, that shake up of your entire world, right? Hard later. It's still there.
Yes, it is. And I think you're really talking about capacity too, right? Our own mental capacity and emotional capacity to trust ourselves to deal with it.
Well, betrayal is such a unique and different type of experience. So there's a lot that we do with that. And in fact, I did a study. It made 3 discoveries. That was the first one, that betrayal is a different type of trauma that needs a different way to heal. So anybody who tells you trauma's trauma, that's not true. I did the research and I have the proof. Anybody who tells you time heals all wounds, that doesn't work either. Not with betrayal. So, the nature of betrayal is like, let's take, for example, someone you love. Let's say you lose someone you love. You grieve, you're sad, you mourn the lost. Life will never be the same. But when you look back at that experience, you don't need to rewrite the whole relationship. It gets rewritten after betrayal because you're like, wait a second, when I was thinking this, they were thinking this. When I was doing this, they were doing this. Everything comes into question. Also with betrayal, with let's say death of a loved one, people rally. What do you need? How can I help? Let me take the kids for a couple days, whatever it is, right? But with betrayal, there's so much shame, humiliation, embarrassment for something the betrayed didn't even do. So they're struggling and suffering in silence with one of the most painful of the human experiences. And to make matters worse, let's say it's a relational betrayal. Very often, they're covering for the betrayer. The betrayer is so loved by the family, the friends, the community, all of it. So the betrayed is now taking the heat at the, taking the brunt of that. So again, it's like they've broken their leg and they're running a marathon. You see?
Yes.
And also the difference is there's when again, let's use that example, you lose someone you love. Life as you've known it is no longer. And the invitation is to rebuild your life without them, right? Well, with betrayal, not only is there a shattering of life as you've known it, there's a shattering of the self that you've known as well. Rejection, abandonment, belonging, confidence, worthiness, trust. So what most people do is they try to rebuild their life. They don't bother rebuilding the self. And that's why one of the reasons why they don't heal.
That makes perfect sense to me. I've really been exploring something that I call compound confidence and how trust accumulates within us based on our experiences and the story that it tells that we narrate based on that. And it makes perfect sense when we're betrayed, that story changes because now that value often is seen from somebody else's point of view instead of our own. We kind of give that story away, it sounds like, and give that power to somebody else.
Well, and listen, I trust is huge. I wrote the book Trust Again, so I understand the importance of it. It's But here's also, this is where well-meaning, well-intentioned coaches, counselors, therapists get this so tragically wrong. They'll say, just you start with a low stakes thing. Start with like a little bit of trust with a friend or something where you rebuild trust, because it's very uncomfortable not to trust. And usually what we do is once trust is shattered, we trust no one, or we don't like the feeling, so we want to give that back so quickly. And again, that's so off. And here's why. When we trust somebody, we have our own system. Everybody has their own system they create to decide if someone is trustworthy. Like maybe when they say or do something consistently, repeatedly, 50 or 100 times, whatever our number is, I can decide that they're trustworthy. That's my system, let's just say, right? Now that person betrays our trust. Not only is it so shocking and shattering that they betrayed our trust, what's even worse, and this is the part that gets missed, what's even worse is we look at it and we say, oh no, my system that I've created to discern trustworthiness is broken. My compass is flawed. I can't trust myself. I don't feel any sense of safety now because the system I had in place to let me know if someone was safe or not is broken. You see? So trusting in someone, we have no business in doing that. We don't trust ourselves anymore. That has to get rebuilt. Does that make sense?
Right. Yes. And that was the next thing I was going to ask you about. How much of that is really driven by the loss of trust in our own discernment and our own decision making?
Yeah, so much of it. And in fact, the second discovery was that there's this collection of symptoms, physical, mental, and emotional, so common to betrayal, it's now known as post-betrayal syndrome. Now, we just recently published, it's the largest study on betrayal ever conducted with over 100,000 people. And when we talk about trust, what was the number? I just had to increase it because it grew. Now, imagine over 100,000 people, 92 of them are hesitant to trust. So think about, if you're hesitant to trust, how is that going to affect every workplace thing you do, every relationship you have, your own judgment? It's like, what do I even choose for lunch? I don't know. My own system is broken, you see? So all of that, how do you trust a boss, a coworker, a collaborative partner? And we don't even trust ourselves. Because the way we look at it, we say, well, I can't trust the person I put my trust in, the one I trusted the most. And where was I? How did I not see? How did I not know? So if I can't trust the person I trusted the most and I don't trust myself, how in the world can I trust in anything and anyone? It all gets torn down and it all needs to be rebuilt.
It makes me think about, I'm a mentor in a lot of women's groups, not a lot, but a few women's groups. And we often see a lot of mental abuse affect their trust system and their trust mechanism. And they get gaslighting and they make us really question if something really is our fault, and it breaks down trust too. How do you see that playing in that great big number, 92%?
Yeah, it's in those types of relationships, it quote unquote works when someone's off kilter, when they don't feel confident in their own decisions, when they don't trust their own judgment, when they don't have a sense of empowerment or personal power. When you think about that, that's where that typical gaslighter, narcissist, is such the empath, the heart-loving, let's say, just kind person who's hoping to be in a reciprocal relationship. That's like tick on a dog. And I write about that in Trust Again, where that's the perfect storm, right? Because that's where that narcissist gets their food, gets their fuel.
And they can see it in somebody. It's like they can smell it in them.
Yeah. And so the challenge in a relationship like that is when that person who's being gaslit, who's being prey, regains their confidence and their sense of self and all of it, the other person's in trouble. It's no longer a match. And that's what happens when they move through the 5 stages of betrayal recovery. That was actually the 3rd discovery.
Wow, that's fantastic. And I've seen that oftentimes in my own life where somebody moves in and out of my life pretty quickly because I don't have those signals back to them, letting them know that they can do that to me. And I've had people in my life when was able to overcome. I started my life over in my 50s. And when I finally got to that place where here I am again, and I'm more in my own skin today than I've been in a couple of decades. And people just, man, they disappear out of your life because you don't tolerate that behavior anymore and you don't accept it and you're not taking care of them and doing all the little things for them to make sure that they're happy. And people that I love dearly, I'm loving from afar and choosing not to have them, and they aren't comfortable either. That's part of the reason. So because I'm able to come from a place of healed, and so now you can't betray me again. It's not that I am averse to trusting anyone. It's that I'm averse to trusting you based on personal experience. And that is vastly different than that overall feeling of I've been beat down over and over and over again. And now I don't trust the decision about where I should work, what I should eat. You can really lose identity from betrayal.
Well, you do. It's because it's all shattered. But the beautiful part of it is it can get rebuilt to something so much stronger, so intentionally, so much more deliberately and intentionally than it was before. And when you use that trauma as a catalyst for your transformation, that's trauma well served. But what most people do is they just try to recover. Your old self is gone. There's why in the world, you've been through the hardest part already. Why would you just want to recover? No, you owe it to yourself to move all the way through. And that's where people typically get stuck out of the 5 stages of betrayal recovery. They get stuck in stage 3, by far, hands down, the most common place they get stuck. They're surviving, but they're barely doing more than that. They're struggling. They're medicating and suppressing symptoms of post-betrayal syndrome. They're at risk of repeat betrayals because nothing has really changed. And they're wondering, am I just destined to this? Well, yes, you are when you're in stage 3. Out of the 5 stages. So I'm happy to share symptoms of post-betrayal syndrome. I'm happy to share the 5 stages, whatever serves.
Well, I'm curious as to when you're in that feeling of you're stuck and you've identified your betrayal. You've been through the first couple of them and you get in that. What does that really look like in real life? What is somebody like, if I'm a business leader and I'm years past my divorce maybe, or whatever it is that betrayal was, and I'm excelling pretty well in my day to day, but I still am not trusting. I'm not forming personal relationships. I'm not really connecting with people at work. But what does that look like? What is that? Sometimes doesn't feel like betrayal now, years later, but it still is.
It is.
So I'm trying to figure out what that looks like.
Yeah. So it looks like functioning with a flatness. It takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable again. It takes a lot of courage to trust again. And very often, very successful people say, you know what? I've been there, done that. It's safer this way. In fact, 76% out of our 100,000 plus, 76%, so that's the majority of people who've been betrayed, they're preventing themselves from forming deep relationships because they're afraid of being hurt again. First of all, look at the power you're giving that experience. Because that person may not know, care, remember, they may not even be alive. And here you are, decades later, because of something left unhealed. I mean, the good news is you could heal from all of it. But when someone is stuck, and my most recent book for practitioners is called Unstuck because it's such a missed opportunity. There are so many well-meaning, well-intentioned practitioners who don't understand the language of betrayal because let's say they're an executive coach or just a life coach and someone's not just, they're a life coach. And someone's coming to them for success, for confidence, for whatever. But meanwhile, if they don't understand the language of betrayal and the person assumes, well, it happened years ago, of course I'm over it by now. No, that's not the case at all. So someone, let's say in that stuck place, gets to a place where they're fine. They're fine. Like, I guess I'm okay. Now what happens is, biggest missed opportunity, the coach graduates that client. The client's like, I guess this is as good as it's going to get. And that coach says, I don't understand it. Like my best stuff works so beautifully on so many other people. For some reason with this one client, they were resistant. It wasn't working. I don't get it. That was a betrayal client. So they graduated them in this place of fine in this stage 3. And meanwhile, the reason why they got into coaching, mentoring, whatever, was for the transformations. That's what happens in stages 4 and 5.
So fine is an acronym for feelings I'm not expressing.
Yeah.
And my friend will say, "Oh, you're fine?" I said, "I'm definitely fine. Definitely have feelings I'm not expressing in this moment." And I was thinking about one of the things in my own journey is I really felt like I was pretty far through it and I was doing well. Right. I'd started my agency and my podcast and I'm going, and I would still get stuck and get frozen. And that whole kind of functional freeze of I'm operating out here, everybody sees me and I look like I have all my shit together. And internally, I'm struggling to be vulnerable and I'm struggling to trust and I'm struggling to put it back together again. And that functional freeze space is a place that I didn't realize I was in, right? I just thought I was choosing. Like by not choosing is a choice. And I would be super hard on myself. And I'm wondering if there's not a connection to betrayal trauma that is kind of behind that, because it's a lack of trust in ourselves to make it through and to make a good decision.
Yeah, one of the
it
classic
feels similar to me.
One of the classic things we do is we numb, avoid, and distract ourselves, and it keeps us stuck in stage 3. But here's what's so sneaky. When we're numbing, avoiding, distracting with food, drugs, alcohol, work, TV, we know it. The sneaky ones are when we're numbing, avoiding, distracting through work, through exercise. People commend us on it. Oh my gosh, you're such a hard worker. Look at you taking your health so seriously. Go you. But we're using it as a distraction. I remember a woman came to see me once and she's like, "Dr. Debi, I have this new look at my health plan and this and that." And she was telling me all the things. Isn't that great? I said, "Well, it's great if that was your problem. That's not what you came to me for. She came for it to heal the betrayal." So if you're using a way to numb and distract that's even seemingly healthy, it's preventing you from doing the deep work of moving through the experience. And I see this so often with super successful people because they've used their mind their whole lives to do an incredible amount of work. It's the wrong tool for the job. It's like if you were doing every improvement, home improvement with a hammer, sometimes you need a different tool.
All right. Sometimes you got to have a screwdriver.
That's it.
So often we think of that as resilience, right? I'm being resilient. I'm working. I'm hanging in there. I'm overcoming. But sometimes resilience is the mechanism keeping us from healing, right? We're stuck in being resilient and being tough and hanging in there, especially women. We do that all the time. And then we get really rewarded and accommodated. "Oh, good job, Debra, for hanging in there and being strong and being resilient." But when does it cross the line?
Yeah, and this is everything you're saying is all stage 3 stuff. And that's why the majority of people land and stay there. Because like I said, we're commended for it. We're bouncing back. We seem so strong. But there's such a fear of the death and destruction of the old, and that's the only way you birth the new. But we don't, whether it's a new you, a new collective you with your partner, the boss, the coworker, whoever that issue was with. And at the very least, even if it's just this rebirth of the new you, I'm going to show you what I mean in a story, because this will explain it. This is what so many people do. And I did 2 TEDx talks. So I talked about this in, I think, Do You Have Post-Betrayal Syndrome, that TEDx. And I talk about an old house. This is what most people do. This is the difference between resilience and trauma and transformation. Let's say there's an old house and it needs a new roof. You get a new roof. That's resilience. You're restoring it, right? Let's say it needs a new paint job and you paint. That's resilience. You're restoring it and you're bringing it back to what it was. Here's trauma, betrayal, trauma, and transformation. A tornado comes by and levels the house. Your new roof's not going to fix it, and your paint job's not going to fix it, and neither won't fix it, right? Now, here's the thing. You have every right to stand there at the lot where your house once stood and say, "This is the worst thing that's ever happened." You'd be right. And you can call over everybody you know. "Isn't this the most tragic thing you've ever seen?" Everybody will agree. And you have the right to mourn and kick and scream and cry and everything until your last breath. However, if you decide to rebuild the house, you don't have to. But if you decide to, why would you build the same one? There's nothing there, you see?
Yeah.
Why not give it everything the old house didn't have? Why not make it better, more beautiful? But what most people do is they spend a lifetime on resilience. But after betrayal, it's leveled. You get to rebuild whatever you want.
Yes.
That's the missed opportunity.
And I think that's kind of scary for people too, to
scary.
think about. Like, I just want to get back to when I was happy and when I felt good. And that's in the past. And really, the past doesn't exist anywhere except in our memories. And I want to, before we use up all the time being stuck in stage 3 in this conversation, I want to move into, if you're seeing yourself in that, how do you move out of it? How do you make choices that are going to feel wrong, going to feel like you maybe aren't being resilient? And so we're resistant to go do that because it doesn't feel like I'm being strong now. But how do we do that and move forward?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would invite everybody to consider is, just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's good. We confuse familiar with good. It's not. It's only familiar. You know, when you think of anything you've ever done, it was unfamiliar. You took it on. It's familiar now. So we hang on for dear life to the known familiar. The only benefit it gives us so often is that it's the known familiar. But if you're willing to get uncomfortable, if you're willing to move into a space that's unknown, what if there's a version of you that is so healthy, so strong, so confident, so healed, so at peace, and that, you know, waiting for you? That I have seen it thousands of times. You will never find that in stage 3. The only thing in stage 3 is more of the same, compounded with illness, conditions, disease, because you can't not have that when you're in stage 3. That's what stage 3 brings. You have a stage 3 life. But when you move into stage 4, it's stage 4 thoughts, stage 4 decisions, same as in stage 5.
So, and I've talked before about how people get stuck in even horrible situations because their brain's used to it. And so that familiar danger is easier than unfamiliar danger and scariness out here. But I think that we also have to start making those decisions in a different way. And we have to be able to learn through them and accumulate other things. But I think what I lost my train of thought for a minute. Is it possible to revert back into stage 2 and fall back when you are in stage 3? Because if you haven't healed it, even though you're functioning out there, you're still struggling. You're still in the middle of hustle culture. And if I just keep working hard, then it'll eventually all work out. And one, that's not sustainable, but 2, it doesn't heal anything. So can we revert back and backslide? I always say backslide like a naughty Baptist.
Yeah. When you're in stages 4 and 5, you know, it's a different life you're living. It's a whole different story. But when you're in stage 3, it is very common to have repeat betrayals because nothing has really changed. So nothing changed. So you definitely revert back to stage 2, which is shock, trauma, D-Day, discovery day. It's another betrayal because nothing has changed. So very often you can go back between stages 2 and 3 for life. It's exhausting. You're re-traumatized. It's another betrayal. Now you're just so in it thinking, this is my life now, because all you're doing is spending your life surviving the next betrayal and suppressing and medicating your symptoms. That's all you can expect when you're in stages 2 and 3.
I think that people recognize they're in it. They think, why do I keep getting this kind of client? Why do I keep having this job? Why am I attracted to this kind of a person for a relationship? How do they recognize when that's happening? Because I tell you, when you finally move into stage 3 and you can function a little bit, it feels really good. And now you're like, I'm living it. But you can tell
here's what happens. Because functioning feels so much better than the shock and trauma we just came from, we think it's good. And because we don't know there's anywhere else to go, we plant roots here, we park here. We don't know that we're not supposed to. And so that's why if you know what stage you're in and you know this is what happens in stage 3, oh, wait a second, the last thing I'm going to start doing is numbing, avoiding, distracting. Like, here's a really common thing people do. They'll see a well-intentioned, well-meaning therapist, for example. Now, in stage 2, that could be really helpful. In stage 3, it's like crazy glue. Because what happens is we're feeling heard and validated and understood. And if that therapist isn't highly skilled in the 5 stages of betrayal recovery, what you're actually doing is solidifying your spot in stage 3. And if I didn't have 100 people in my career of the PBT Institute come into the PBT Institute with therapy trauma, telling me that story over and over, seeing the same therapist for the same betrayal for 5, 10, 15 years. I mean, and then the research just proved it. You know, when we're reinforcing the stage we're in and when we don't know there's anywhere else to go, it's much harder to move. And because we're so unhappy in that space, but we don't know there's anywhere else to go, when we start numbing, avoiding, distracting right there, we do it for a day, a week, a month. Now it's a habit, a year, 10 years, 20 years. And I can see someone 20 years later and say, you know, that emotional eating you're doing or that drinking, do you think that has anything to do with your betrayal? They look at me like I'm crazy and they say it happened 20 years ago. All they did was put themselves in stage 3 and stay there.
Right. I mean, I have healed things that were from decades and decades ago that I didn't even know were still bothering me, that came up in meditation or somatic breathing. I cried one time about dogs I rehomed 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it was about the dogs as much as it was about just feelings I hadn't allowed myself to express. And the dogs, because they went to a very good home, that were better than they were with me where I was working so many hours. But I think that they were my path to recognize it. They were my path to be able to express it, maybe. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's anything that's unresolved, we're going to, you know, it's going to hold us back in some way. But the idea is, you know, when we face it, feel it, heal it, we move through it. But what I see with so many people is they don't know there's anywhere else to go other than their current experience. And they resign themselves to believing this is as good as it's going to get. So I may as well just, you know, live here. And if I didn't see thousands of people move through the 5 stages of betrayal recovery, you know, I mean, the research proved it. Thousands of people have proved it. So we see it over and over again. When you're in stages 4 and 5, you are living a new life, new levels of confidence, new businesses, new passion projects, new relationships, either with the person who hurt you in a very different way or with someone entirely new. You don't have access to that, any of that, when you're in stage 3.
Boy, I can tell that I am well beyond stage 3, and I'm grateful that I am, because with the way you describe it, I remember feeling that way and not realizing and thinking about it as a singular thing that happened today and not understanding why that feels so significant. And I have these big, big emotions about it, and realizing that those don't belong to this one thing, and they belong to all of it over my lifetime, simply because I accumulated it instead of healing it from the beginning. So now it's accumulated so much. But so do we have to really go back through all of it, or can we go back to the original thing? How does that healing work when you have a whole lifetime of experiences who have built this?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes
betrayal.
it's going back to the first one. You know, we had a woman in our community. She was in her mid-80s. 45% of everyone betrayed has a digestive issue of some kind. Crohn's, IBS, diverticulitis, reflux, you name it. And she had a 70-plus year digestive issue from a family betrayal. She was adopted. They didn't tell her, something like that. So you can imagine over the course of 70 years, the protocols, the medications, the supplements, the foods, for her just to resign herself, you know, I have a bad stomach, it's who I am. 2 weeks into healing the actual betrayal, 2 weeks, she healed from 70 plus years of a gut issue. That's what happens when you deal with the root cause.
Yes, that makes perfect sense to me. And I think it should give people hope that are out there thinking, I've been going to therapy and I can't get past this. I think this is as good as I'm going to get. And I think it's kind of terrifying to think about. I could be going to a counselor and never have that counselor take me to the next step. And I'm like, what are they waiting for? Are they waiting for me to suggest it and for it to just happen naturally?
Well, that's why one of my greatest missions was really to certify as many coaches, counselors, therapists as I can in the 5 stages of betrayal recovery, not to do this instead of what they're doing, but to have these incredible tools in their tool belt. So because these clients are coming their way anyway, but at least they'll know, oh, that's what stage they're in. Like I said, they're coming to them not specifically for betrayal, for anything, confidence, happiness, success, whatever. But when they understand the language of betrayal, they know, oh my gosh, this is stage 3 talk. And when I bring it up in a specific way, we can move them forward to stages 4 and 5. And like I said earlier, that's why someone gets into this work anyway, for the joy, for the transformation. And
Yes.
they don't have to help in keeping that person stuck.
I think it's fascinating, actually, to think about. I'm very big into human behavior, and as it applies to growth and business growth and buying behavior and why people make decisions to trust and what makes them lean back. And I think that having that betrayal trauma can even affect that their natural buying habits, right? Now they're skeptical. Now we have people that are in that skeptical space that maybe don't naturally belong there. And so it's harder. It's harder to connect with them because of it.
Of course, because they don't trust. Yeah.
Right. And for me, I think oftentimes we don't realize that it's betrayal. And I will tell you that my counselor, I went into grief counseling. My mother dying was like the final loss that kicked me into the I'm not functioning stage of life, and was the catalyst for me to change my life. And I didn't realize I was in functional freeze, and it was very relieving because I was being really hard on myself, right? I was really being critical and hard on myself for procrastinating and for not being able to do this simple thing that frankly doesn't require me to learn any new skills, doesn't require any great effort, but I cannot seem to do it for whatever reason. And I would be so hard on myself because of it. So finding out that I was frozen in fight or flight was very empowering to me. But more empowering was that he was able to give me grounding exercises and tools to help with it. And so I can just feel how frustrating it would be for none of the tools that my counselor was giving me to work, because they didn't really understand that it was betrayal that I was feeling, or not grief, right? I mean, you are grieving because of the betrayal, but it's not the same as regular grief.
Not at all.
My mom dying didn't betray me. It was just something that happened and got into levels of grief. So I think that that's true too. So how do you kind of tell the difference in that space?
Yeah, well, there's a protocol for grief counseling. There's a protocol for, other types of counseling, and there's a 5-stage of betrayal recovery protocol. And that's the missing piece, because when counselors, coaches, therapists are using a grief model on a betrayal client, it doesn't work.
It only works a little, right? It only works this little bit at the beginning. But what actually caused the grief?
That's it. So
because my grief was complicated.
Right.
My mom's death was the big thing, but I had betrayed myself, and being in functional freeze and not making decisions was betrayal to myself. But the betrayal that caused me to go into functional freeze was there too. And I was grieving it, but I didn't really think of it as a betrayal recovery.
Yeah.
And I made it through because I was really working hard to change myself and my mindset and my emotional regulation, which is part of the protocol. But now that makes a lot of sense to me. And let's talk about what you're doing. Obviously, lots and lots, writing books and having big scientific studies is a big step to get licensed counselors and psychiatrists and psychologists to adapt your protocol. What can we do moving forward to kind of help find our way through that? And what are you doing to help spread the word to all of those people?
Yeah, well, that's what things like this really help, because I can only take the message to the people in my world, so it's people see the difference. Counselors, coaches, therapists experience the difference in their clients. I have a lot of case studies in my newest book, Unstuck, where it talks about, I have, some of our PBT certified coaches and practitioners talk about the difference in their practice when they understand the 5 stages. And it's really just to get it into the right hands so that they can better serve their clients and patients. That's the whole idea. You can't use a grief model on a betrayal client. You can't use general coaching on a betrayal client. The same stuff that works beautifully with a betrayal client backfires every single time because it has to be stage appropriate. Let's say someone's saying, oh, I'll use my best mindset stuff. If someone's in stage 2, shock and trauma, it's a disaster. So it really all depends, has to do with the trust that's been shattered. It has to do with the self that's been shattered. It has to do with knowing the stages, knowing the symptoms of post-betrayal syndrome, and working with that person appropriately. And it never crosses the line between therapy and coaching. It's very clear. It's coaching.
That is a great place to end on. That was such a great final statement, and I think is going to really help. I know this episode is going to help our audience. We talk a lot about all of the different parts, right? And all the other ways, but no one has ever really talked about it from a place of betrayal. And I think it's kind of the human condition. We get betrayed a little bit. And if we don't deal with it then and find our way through, it accumulates like everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have all kinds of resources and everything that can help the PBT, Post-Betrayal Transformation, thepbtinstitute.com, whatever serves.
And is that the best place to get in touch with you? Are there any other places, or is that, and where are your books available to be?
Oh, they're all
purchased?
on Amazon, but you could find all of them on the site, which leads to Amazon. But I would say it for the practitioner who wants to understand the stages and better serve their clients, Unstuck would be a fit. And for the person who's been betrayed, the original study, I talk all about it in Trust Again.
Fantastic. And I will link to all of Dr. Debi's stuff in the show notes so you guys can find it easily there. And if today's conversation resonated with you, if it changed how you think about trust, leadership, resilience, or the experiences that we carry, and maybe betrayal, then my work lives beyond this podcast in your growth. Thank you. I help business owners and leadership teams better understand the human side of growth, because behind every strategy, every sale, every customer relationship are people constantly interpreting experiences, building trust, and making decisions. If you're looking for a place to start, of course, check out Dr. Debi's book. If you want a little bit lighter reading, I have a free resource called The Human Sales Playbook, and it's designed to help you understand the human dynamics behind trust, communication, decision-making, and growth so you can build stronger relationships with your customers, your team, and yourself. I will link to all of that in the show notes with my contact information and all of Dr. Debi's also. Dr. Debi, thank you so much for coming and sharing all of your wisdom. It was such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.
Until next time, everyone, stand strong in your power, especially when it gets uncomfortable. See you next week.